The Ohio State Buckeyes are on an inevitable path at winning the national championship, and it has been one of the most impressive turnarounds in all of college football. And you look at the magnitude of what this means for Ohio State, from Ryan Day losing to Michigan 4 straight times, and this embarrassing loss this year on a $20 million roster with studs everywhere, with this defense that returned. A lot of those guys could have gone to the draft last year, but they all decided to stay. They were building something really special in Columbus. That's why we saw them go out and get Quinshaw Judkins, go out and get Will Howard, go out and get Chip Kelly, the former UCLA head coach, to be the offensive coordinator for Ohio State. And they really went all out to go out and win a national championship. And when they lost to Michigan, it felt like it was the tipping point. 4 straight losses for Ryan Day. And you had a lot of people saying, get this guy out of town. But once the college football playoffs came around, this Ohio State squad has been unbelievable. They handed it to Tennessee in a matchup that I thought was going to be a lot closer. And then once they saw Oregon, they destroyed them in the Rose Bowl in an outcome that I don't think most people saw. And then most recently, we see them beating Texas, and now they're in the national championship against Notre Dame. And I don't think it feels real for a lot of people that were looking at this. But I saw this Ohio State team coming into the college football playoff, a squad that really had reached rock bottom after that loss to Michigan. And at that point, there's only one way to go, and that's up. And it was either they lose to Tennessee in the first round and they probably fire Ryan Day, or they get hot with this really good squad that we know that they have. And that's been the exact outcome for the Buckeyes. And that was why I wanted to hit the panic button a little bit on this disaster of a game that happened against Michigan. I feel like when you look at rivalry games, especially this one, the game, one of the biggest rivalries in all of sports, you kind of have to throw all of your star players, your stats, records, rankings. You have to throw all of that out the window, because at the end of the day, anything can happen in a rivalry. And that's what we saw against Michigan. But when you look at Ohio State's body of work, and that was really what I took a look at when I looked at the regular season for the Buckeyes. They went on the road against Oregon, and if it weren't for a late offensive pass interference against Jeremiah Smith, or if it weren't for Will Howard going down a little too late, I think this team kicks a field goal in Autzen on the road against the #1 team in the country, and they would fall that game. They'd lose to Michigan, and they'd go 10-2. But you look at that Penn State game on the road in Happy Valley. That is a tough place to play, and they pulled out a big-time win. That defense played incredible. And the same thing against Indiana, #5 team in the country. They came on the road to Columbus, and Ohio State really handled them with ease. And right now, you can look at every other conference. Look at how poorly the SEC did in bowl game play. Look at how poorly the Big 12 did, or look at how poorly the ACC did. I think it was pretty obvious that the Big 10 is the best conference in college football, and outside of that Oregon loss, and of course the Michigan loss, Ohio State really looked good during the regular season. And that's why I was ready for this team to have a big time bounce back, because it was either Ryan Day gets fired at rock bottom or they bounce back. And that's exactly what they did. We saw Will Howard and Jeremiah Smith have this statement performance against Tennessee that kind of woke everybody up. And you were like, okay, if Will Howard and this offense can play like this, they can win a national championship. There's no doubt about it. And they were definitely on the tougher side of the bracket. And that's where a lot of people were frustrated when you looked at the college football playoff rankings. And they had to go through Oregon. They had to go through Texas. And when most people looked at the college football playoff as a whole, they probably thought that Oregon, Ohio State, and Texas were the 3 best teams in college football, considering that Carson Beck got injured for Georgia. And so it was a really tough path for Ohio State, and they've been tested. Then they went to the Rose Bowl, played the #1 seed, the #1 team for that rematch against Oregon, and they dominated the Ducks. They looked so great on both sides of the ball. Will Howard carried this momentum from that Tennessee game. His connection with Jeremiah Smith was so lethal, and that was really when a lot of people got to see Jeremiah Smith on the big stage, and they finally were like, okay, this kid is going to be really good for a really long time. And he's only a true freshman wide receiver, just turned 19, and he is an absolute freak of nature. And of course, the defensive side of the ball, they were literally pitching a shutout all the way until that final drive where the Ducks were able to score a touchdown, get that 2-point conversion. But I've just been so impressed with this Ohio State team. That willingness to look yourself in the mirror when you lose to Michigan and you have that fight on the field, and you have Jack Sawyer saying, man, they're not going to plant that flag on our field. Those guys were hurt by that game, and it was deservedly so. You cannot lose to Michigan 4 straight years, and you have a few of those players that have lost to them every single year that they've been there, and they felt that pain. And they've used that motivation into the college football playoff, and now they see this Notre Dame team that is excellent defensively. And one of the things that I highlighted coming into the college football playoff was Will Howard. He either had a massive opportunity as a senior to majorly increase his draft stock and to really get scouts to look at him with his big 6'5" frame, 240 pounds. He's mobile. He has a big arm, but he's very inconsistent. And that was the biggest problem with him. He'd sometimes have some really bad throws, really inaccurate throws that would lead to interceptions, or he'd fumble the ball. And that was a big problem with Will Howard, was protecting the football and keeping it safe. And he's done a tremendous job throughout the college football playoff. And right now, with only one game left, if he can take care of business, have one more good game against Notre Dame, I think he's one of those guys in a weaker draft class that really has an opportunity to increase his draft stock. And I definitely think there are a few quarterbacks that looked at this opportunity in the college football playoff to increase their draft stock, because we always have a major riser that takes advantage of what they've done down the stretch and get them really a higher draft pick. And that's what Michael Penix Jr. did last year when he made it all the way to the national championship. Even J.J. McCarthy winning the national championship, being a first-round pick. And you looked at guys like Drew Aller or Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers. Those were kind of the top three guys that everybody was looking at. It's like, okay, if they play really good, they can really increase their draft stock. And then you had the Will Howards, you had the Riley Leonards, and even the Curtis Rourkes of the world. It's like, okay, if these guys can go on a run, they're going to increase their draft stock. And maybe we're looking at a day 2 type of pick for Will Howard. You never know if people get intrigued by that big frame, that big arm. If they feel like they can mold him into a player that is ready for the pro level, he may even go day 1. But at the end of the day, I've just been so impressed with this Ohio State team. Their willingness to battle adversity, to really use that Michigan loss as fuel after losing 4 straight times. And it would be hard to bounce back from that, but they used it as motivation. They used it as fuel. And a guy that I don't think is getting enough credit right now, because a lot of people switched up on him. A lot of people turned their back on him and said, get him out of here. And that's Ryan Day. People were ready to get rid of him. They wanted him gone. When you're the head coach of the Buckeyes, only 2 things matter. That's winning national championships and beating Michigan. And Ryan Day, 4 straight losses and no national championships. And of course, things would probably go different if they had that field goal that was made against Georgia a few seasons ago in the college football playoff. But I still think that he had so much. He had really the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he did a great job of having his team ready to go. This Chip Kelly-led offense has been tremendous as well. So I just think it's been a really cool story to see what Ohio State has done to turn around their season and to get to this spot where they're an 8.5-point favorite against Notre Dame. And I just think this defense is going to be suffocating for Riley Leonard and for the Fighting Irish. And we know that they have a great defense, Notre Dame does, and so does Ohio State. It's going to be a good defensive matchup. But I just think this Ohio State team has been so great on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think there's any answers for it. There's no answers for it. You look at Tennessee, they didn't have any answers for it. You look at Texas, they didn't have any answers for it. Oregon didn't have any answers for it. And I think right now, Notre Dame is not going to have any answers for Will Howard. They're not going to have any answers for Travion Henderson or Quinshaw Judkins or this dynamic duo of receivers in Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka. This team is dangerous. They're really scary. And as long as Will Howard doesn't turn the football over, this is without a doubt the best team in the country. And that's what we all thought coming into this season. I'm Caden Kubler, and thank you guys for watching.